Hello and welcome to this DIY sewing tutorial where I transform an old stained blanket to a nice coat with some different patchwork flowers that I have from my nan. They're like, I think it's called piecing, where you add the flowers by having these little templates of paper and then you put fabric around them and stitch them together by hand. And that is what I'm going to use to cover these not so nice stains on this blanket that I got from the thrift shop. So I thought it could be a nice way to do the design. First of all, I've got my blanket folded here and I'm just going to use a coat to kind of measure how much fabric I need for the body and how much I need for the sleeves, because I want to use as much of the fabric or as much of the rug as possible. So what I just cut off was for the sleeves, and then I've got this piece that I will use for the body. So I'm just using a different coat here and I'm putting it up against the folded edge, and I've got the folded edge of the coat as well, so that will be my back to the jacket. And then I want to make the overlap in front a little bit bigger, so I want to use the fringes that's on the rug. So as you can see, I'm not going to cut down the front here. I'm actually going to just cut along the sides and cut along the shoulders, and then leave the opening like that so I can use the fringes and have an overlap on the coat. So that's my two pieces for the body, and then I'm going to use this little leftover to make some sleeves and to make some pockets. So I'm just going to fold it up so I've got a folded piece, and then again I'm going to use my coat to measure from, and it's just approximately. I'm not being too fussy and too detailed. I'm giving it a couple of centimeters seam allowance and then trying to kind of aim for the curve that's on the actual coat as well. And that coat you can also see a tutorial on here on my YouTube on actually how to make. And then I'm just cutting two squares of what's left of the fabric to use for some pockets. And I'm going to now give all the pieces a quick little stitch through with my serger, because that makes it so that none of the edges fray and it looks kind of nice and neat. But I'm not going to serge where I have the fringes, of course, because I'm going to keep and use them. And I also have some of the edges of the coat. They're already finished because it's woven material, so they already kind of have this nice edge. And I'm not going to use the serger there, so I'm actually just going to save my seams there. So if you see some of the seams and you think, why isn't she giving them a little quick trip on the serger? Then it's because that's already like a nice edge from the coat, from the blanket itself. For example, on this pocket where I only do 3 pieces or 3 sides, 3 edges, because the last one is from the bottom of the rug, so that already has that nice edge. But everywhere else that's kind of raw edge, that means not a finished edge from the actual blanket or not a nice fringe edge, I'm going to give that a little do-over with my serger. And you can also just use your normal sewing machine and give them a quick zigzag stitch. That is also fine. And that will also, keep the edges from fraying and make it look nice and neat. So you can do it both ways. I just love the serger because it cuts off at the same time, and that's always nice. And then it's just a little bit of cutting all the thread so that all the pieces look really nice and neat. That's quickly done. And then I'm ready to start stitching both the pieces of the patchwork flowers on top and also the pieces together. So first of all, I'm just giving these flowers a bit of ironing just to make sure that the edges are pressed in towards the back. And then I'm going to see where I want them placed, because of course I want to hide those stains where they aren't so nice. So I'm just going to find my little kit here of things I need, because I need to actually unpick all those little stitches, not the actual stitches that keep the flowers together, but when you do this paper piecing, you add the fabric onto the paper with these little stitches of thread through the paper and through the fabric, just to keep it from kind of going anywhere, so you hold it in place while you stitch. And of course I'm not going to stitch it onto the actual pieces of the coat with those paper pieces in, so I have to release them and then take them carefully out. And that's also why I did a bit of ironing before. That's just to make sure that the edges are nice and sharp, so it doesn't kind of fall apart in the shape when I take these little paper pieces out. And those paper pieces can be used again, of course, for another project, so that's really good. And you have to be quite careful. And also these pieces are hand stitched together, and yeah, my nan made most of them. I've made some of them, and they are kind of not always so thoroughly stitched together. That depends. So be very careful when pulling that you don't suddenly get a loose thread and just start pulling them from each other. And I'm just doing a little quick iron again, pressing them so all the fabric that needs to fold towards the back is folded towards the back like that. And then it's simply about placing it, making sure that it covers the stain it needs to cut, or it needs to cover, and then I'm just putting them in place with some pins and needles so they won't kind of go anywhere when I need to stitch them on. So that's what's done here. And this is really the fun part, because now I start sewing those flowers on where the stains are, and I don't do it too carefully. You can also do it by hand, of course, if you want to make it kind of really really specific and with hand stitches so you don't see it that much. But I'm actually just going over it, stitching in place on my sewing machine, and I'm just going down with some kind of straight lines, and then after that I'm going along every edge of every flower. But I like to just get them stitched on so I know that they're stuck in place and they don't move, and then I kind of stitch all the way around, so I kind of turn and turn and turn until it's stitched in place. And you might not want to do it like that, but I'm not too worried about those lines showing up even though they're not completely straight, because I don't notice it, so it's fine for me. So here we've got the pieces stitched on, the stains are covered, it's really looking good. So now it's about stitching the pieces of the coat together. So I've got my two front pieces here with the fringes, and I'm putting on the back piece on top of it. So I've got two shoulder seams that I need to stitch, and I'm not going to stitch it completely shut because I need a little neck opening. So I'm just putting in some pins just to try to measure how much I need for my neck opening. And you can always put some pins in and try and stitch it, and then see if you need to stitch a little bit more or if you need to undo the thread a bit. I like to not stitch too much at first, to just try it on and then see how much more I need. But because it's got this overlap, I want the neck opening to be quite small, so it's still stuck on my body even though it has that overlap. So that's the shoulder seams now stitched together. And because there are some stains up there as well, I need to just put another flower on here. So I've got them ready, I've got the paper pieces out. So then I'm just putting on a flower there. So that's basically the same way that I did it before, putting in some pins, and then I'm going to stitch it in place. So some of these, kind of stain covers you can't put on until you've stitched part of the coat together, perhaps like this. I could do a couple of the flower patches first on the individual pieces, and then as you stitch some of the pieces together, you can then add some more, of course, also depending on the stains. But you might also have something that isn't actually stained, where you don't need to cover anything, but you simply just want to make these decorative flower pieces, put them onto the coat. And then of course you can also decide to have some on the shoulder, have some on the seams, so you have to put them on as you sew, kind of a bit by bit. And now this one is done soon, and that means that I will be ready to put on the sleeves, because now of course we only have the front pieces and the back piece put together, and I still need to add the sleeves. So I've got the seam where my two shoulder points have been stitched together, and I need to find the center of that, and then I can add the sleeve piece there. So that has a slight curve to it because I measured from the other coat, and then I just find the middle of the curve and then stitch it on after it's been aligned with the shoulder seam. And I just stitch it on all the way along, and then afterwards I sew the actual sleeves together from the sleeve opening and then all the way down under the arm and down through the sides. So I'm folding it here, and then I'm putting it into the machine with sleeve opening and stitching it in place, and making sure that I get nice and even aligned under here the arm. Make sure the seams are aligned, and then I go down the side, and that is then one side stitched together. So that is quite simple, and then it's just about doing it for the other side as well, of course. And you might have some more flowers that then need to be put on. So for these pockets, I'm just folding the fabric, the edges in 1 centimeter towards the back, folding it again, so down along 3 sides, so that means the 2 sides and 1 bottom, folding that. So I'm not folding the top bit, and that's because that's actually one of the nice edges from the actual blanket, so I'm just saving a seam there because that's already finished and fine. And now this is then ready to be placed onto the coat to see where it's going to go. And it's a good idea to put it in place with some pins and then try it on just to see that you've got the placement right. And you can see I don't worry at all about stripe pattern placement at all. I actually like it when it's a little bit off, when you have like stripes going one way on one piece and the other way on the other. And also it's going to be hard to place it perfectly when I don't have any more fabric than I have. And I would rather have the pockets being in a nice height for my hands than the pattern fitting properly. So now I'm just stitching down kind of on the seam where I've already stitched the fabric in on the pocket. So I'm stitching it down right next to that and in place, and then the pockets will be on. And again, you do the same for the other side, and then you can always measure from the pocket that you've already put on, so you make sure they're at the same height, and that's a really good thing. And yeah, there is something magical about pockets. It's so nice to have pockets in your stuff. And for the last opening, that is the neck opening. That's the last thing we need to do. And I've got this knitted tape piece that I'm going to put on. So I'm putting it front to front. So front against the fabric, the front of the fabric. And then I'm just stitching it in place down along the side, very close to the edge, pretty much like I would stitch on some bias tape. Just the difference is that this one doesn't have any folds. It simply only has, just a straight piece of tape, but I'm stitching it down there as if it had a fold. And then afterwards, when that's stitched in place, then I can fold it in towards the back, and then I can hide that raw edge in there. So I'm just folding that little end corner bit up. So it's stitched in now, and then simply folding it in towards the back. And it's all right if you kind of leave a little bit so you can see it. Just fold it in, and you can leave a little bit so there's a little kind of piping almost that you can see, and then just stitching that in place. And the bottom and the sleeve openings, they don't need to be finished, because for those I use the actual I use the actual edge of the blanket. So that's fine as it is. But of course, if you want to hem it, you can easily just fold it a couple of centimeters towards the back if you have enough length on the sleeves, of course, and the body, and then just stitch it in place. So a very quick way to use an old blanket to have this really comfy coat. And I've been using it loads for when I've been going to markets and fairs, because it's really good if you're standing like in a cold place, and it has the nice pockets that you can put some change or business cards or something in. So super comfy, and I hope you're inspired to make one yourself. Don't be afraid of buying something or using something that might have a little stain or something, because you can still do something really nice with it. Just use your imagination and mix it all up. It's fun, I promise you. So thank you for watching, and see you next time. Bye bye.